Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Genesis Invitational DFS Tactics Show. We have a lot to cover: the projected ownerships, the updated forecast, and all of the rankings that you will need to dominate this week's DFS slate at Riviera Country Club for the Genesis Invitational. We've got a fun show. I'm looking forward to it. Let's not waste any more time on an intro. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool, or best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research weekly around the PGA Tour, generally around course history and patterns of winners at that tournament. That comes out every Monday afternoon. So if you want to see the weekly research I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage or player exposure for that week's DFS slate. That comes out after the DFS Tactics show and calls on Wednesday evening, so that'll come out later this evening. So if you want to see those pieces of information, then give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation, and he continues throughout the week giving you his own version of course history, recent form, and all of that. And besides this week, when he took this week off due to some family obligations, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat if you are a subscriber. It's been a little chaotic, especially for me this February as I've been busy, but you will be able to join him in his Substack chat for the DFS talk. He's gracious enough to host me over there, and we continue the DFS talk over there after calls. So if you aren't a subscriber, you're really missing out. Go show him some support. Follow him over on social media and subscribe to that article. It is free to do, by the way. And then lastly, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. In addition to the poll question, which I remembered to type up before the show this evening, so we're off to a good start already. In addition to the poll question, I want to hear from you all in that regard, but who are you targeting? Who are you fading away from? Have you made any wagers? How do you think Riviera is going to play this week with the amount of precipitation that Southern California has had in the past month or so? So let's figure out our strategies and our tactics for the 2024 Genesis Invitational. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Wednesday evening for the DFS Tactics show over at Windfinder and the updated super forecast. It looks like we already have two people in chat, Awaken and P. Thanks for jumping in there. Much appreciated. Looking forward to this week after what I thought was going to be a good waste management. Turned out to be quite a dud, at least for me. So we're going to try to turn at least my recent lack of success around. And we're going to try and figure out how we are going to attack this signature event, but with a cut. But as promised, there is a poll question. So the poll question this evening, instead of doing anything in terms of thought-provoking DFS or anything like that, I've decided to take a step back and let's have a little bit of fun here. The poll question for this evening. Good evening, Jeff. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. We will definitely get to the data here shortly. We're going to get through this Windfinder forecast first. But first thing we're going to do on a DFS Tactics show, let's go over this poll question. What hole do you think of when you think of Riviera Country Club? Is it the par 5 first? The massive downhill tee shot? Is it the par 3 6th? With the iconic bunker in the middle of the green? Is it the par 4 10th, the very big risk reward, very narrow, skinny green? You've seen eagles and triple bogeys there. A very, very fun hole. Or is it the par 4 18th, the very tough uphill, kind of like a rotunda finish where the gallery is all surrounding the green? Kind of in like an amphitheater. So decided to take a little bit of a step back with the poll question this evening and just have a little bit of fun. I want to see what the community thinks. What hole do you think of when you think of Riviera Country Club? So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. But on to some strategy for this week. Let's take a look at the forecast, at least 10 or so hours away from opening tee time. Look, there doesn't look to be much. There wasn't much for or when we looked at the forecast Monday. It hasn't changed all that much. Still a little bit chilly. High maybe 60 tomorrow. High in the mid 50s on Friday. Yes, this is a no-cut event, but I do not see anything that would signify that you would want to separate out a portion of the field. Looks very, very calm in the mornings, and then maybe picks up to 9 or 10 miles an hour in terms of gusts in the afternoon, and that's the way it is for both days. So I don't see any favor or portion of the field that's going to have an advantage. Just play your guys who you think is going to play best at Riviera this week. No real favor there. And if we take a step back, look at the full forecast, much the same. Saturday, very calm in the morning, wind picks up in the afternoon. Now, the only change will be if this system on Monday indeed gets moved up to Sunday. In my watch throughout the week, it seems like it's backed up in time. So we'll have to take a look at that, and perhaps that'll be a factor for showdown slates come Sunday. But in terms of week-long DFS contests, we're not going to factor any wind this week. It looks all pretty darn calm, and just slightly picks up in the afternoon, which is par for the course generally anyway. So with that, we're going to move over to Fantasy National, and the one filter that we'll kind of review, I can't say for certain that Riviera is going to play tough all 4 rounds, especially with the amount of moisture that they've had in Southern California and all that. But generally speaking, Riviera is a very difficult test of golf. So when rounds are difficult, in the past 12 months, your top performers have been Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Victor Hovland, Tommy Fleetwood, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantlay, Jordan Spieth, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Ricky Fowler. So give these players a decent boost if you have not finished your lineups, or if you're choosing between player A and player B. Give these players a decent boost, as Riviera, generally speaking, is a pretty difficult test of golf. Certainly not on the easy end. We could look at average, but I generally loathe looking at average. So we're just looking at difficult. If you want to continue on down, and I'll zoom in just a little bit here for you. Finishing out maybe the top 15, Russell Henley, Ben On, Max Homa, Sepp Straka, and on down. Those are your top players when rounds are difficult. The other end of the spectrum, players in the field this week who have not played well in the last 12 months when rounds are difficult. Tom Hoagie, Charlie Hoffman, Nick Taylor, Matt Kuchar, Nick Dunlap, only 2 rounds. Grayson Murley, only 4 rounds. Tiger, only 1 round. So take that with a lot of grain of salt, as it's a very small sample size. Justin Thomas, Luke List, Sam Ryder, Nick Hardy, Kevin Yu, Seamus Power, and on down. Those are your players that have not played well when rounds have been difficult in the past 12 months. All right, with that, we've got a lot to cover. We've got some lineups to make and the price board to dissect. So let's not spend too much more time. Let's go ahead and cover the mixed condition model that I made for this week at Riviera for the Genesis. We're starting off with 15% in strokes gained approach. I just think that this is going to be the most important aspect of the tournament this week. You can argue a couple of different ways around what the most important could be. I just think it's going to be strokes gained approach, especially since with the softer conditions, I don't think the ball is going to travel as far. You're not going to get as much rollout as you do in the fairways that you normally get at Riviera. So I think iron play is going to be that much more paramount. 10% in around the green. These greens are difficult to hit. Even though they are the 4th largest greens on tour, they are still very difficult to hit. That contributes to the difficulty of Riviera. But the greens themselves are undulating. They are protected with either false fronts or sharp edges that repel wayward approach shots. So that's why I wanted to really focus on approach and get some around the green in there, because around the green is generally a pretty big factor at Riviera. Only 5% in putting, and you'll see courses multiple. This is the Poa Annua filter where we filter down to Pebble Beach, Riviera, and Torrey Pines. But I'm only doing 5% because we're only able to go back the past 2 years. So not a whole lot of data in here, but I've kind of made up for that with adding another putting statistic that we'll see at the very end of the mixed condition model. But 5% in putting on Poa Annua, 5% in distance. I do think distance will be a factor, but I did not want to put so much emphasis into that that you skew the data. And I think that was probably one of the errors that I made last week at Phoenix. Normally Phoenix does promote a lot of the bombers, but it was very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was just not a factor last week at Phoenix when you go back and check the stats from last week's tournament. Distance just wasn't a thing, so that's what threw my results off, and partially why I had a bad week. So only 5% in distance, but I do think distance helps you more so than being a fairway finder does at Riviera. So 5% in distance, 10% in greens when scoring is difficult. I mentioned that this is probably where I was going to go with the combination of metric and filter. Generally like looking at greens when scoring is difficult. That's generally when greens are the most important. Greens are important here at Riviera, so it just made sense. 10%, I really toyed with 5% or 10%. I just have a strong gut feeling that greens are going to be important. We've talked all week how bogey avoidance is going to be a big factor. So 10% in bogey avoidance when rounds are difficult to par. 10% in total proximity. I'm not as confident with this metric, but the data really backed up looking at total prox as opposed to a specific length. So this is one where, if you wanted to cut back on it 5%, I wouldn't blame you for that. I'm not terribly confident in it, going with the metrics on that. So 10% in total prox, 5% in total par threes. There's no particular range that seems to stand out here at Riviera. 10% in par fours, and 10% on par fours, 450 to 500. We saw throughout the week that this length of par fours just an astronomical amount of weight compared to the rest of the par fours. A little bit over 50% of your strokes gained in par fours come to this range. 6 of the 11 par fours fall to this range on the scorecard. Just a massive amount of correlation between playing these holes well and your performance at Riviera. But I did not want to ignore the risk-reward par 4, and I didn't want to ignore the shorter par 4s, the ones from 400 to 450. So a lot of emphasis in this specific range. You can think about it. You can argue that there's 20% in here, 10% alone in this range, and then 10% in all par 4s. So you're covering a lot in this range, but I think this is going to be the second most important factor this week behind strokes gained approach. So a lot of emphasis in this range of par 4s and in par 4s in general. 5% in the par 5s, 550 to 600. Look, the two back nine par 5s play to about 2/3 of the strokes gained total in terms of the par 5s here at Riviera. Most everybody takes advantage of the par 5 first. So it's really how you perform on those two par 5s on the back nine, and that's why I've isolated that. But it is only 2 holes, so that's why it's only sitting at 5%. And then lastly, to make up for what I wanted to put 10% in total putting, just didn't feel comfortable putting 10% in such a small subset of data. Instead, I've got 5% in 3-putt avoidance on Poa Anna greens the last 2 years. And Riviera, with the amount of the size of these greens and the fact that these greens are generally pretty fast, 3-putt avoidance or 3 putts happen quite often here. So 3-putt avoidance is usually a decent factor. So that's how I kind of made up for the lack of 5% in putting, if you will. So there's the mixed condition model that I've made for this week at Riviera. Look, if off the tee plays a big factor, I'm going to be obviously weak. I just don't see off the tee mattering a whole lot. That's why I'm only looking at 5% driving distance. I just don't see off the tee playing a big factor. If just putting in general is a bigger factor, perhaps birdies gained is something we could have looked at, or if there's a specific range of proximity, I'll be weak to that. But I feel pretty good with the metrics and the filters this week, as opposed to last week when I was confident with the metrics, maybe not necessarily filters. I feel pretty good with this mixed condition model and how Riviera has played generally year over year. So with all that said, let's go ahead and run to Microsoft Excel the reveal of my rankings this week. My top 10 goes as such. I have Victor Hovland, number 1. Scotty Scheffler, 2nd. Patrick Cantlay, 3rd. Xander and Max Homa round out my top 5. Rory, Colin Morikawa, Wyndham Clark, Adam Scott, and Russell Henley round out my top 10. A little bit of an asterisk here. You can see he's really catapulting up in my rankings due to the lack of projected ownership per Fantasy National. But otherwise, here in the top 9, I don't really have a problem. You see just how much or how low these course values are. Prior course performance at Riviera is generally a very, very big deal. And you can see these, very small course values and how they're catapulting up in my rankings as well. Now, Victor Hovland being number 1, I won't argue too much about it. I think I still would put Scheffler number 1 technically, but with the less ownership and the lower course value, that's why Victor Hovland jumps Scotty Scheffler in my rankings. So very quickly, just for a reminder for returning viewers, or if you are a new viewer for your information, my rankings are based on 3 criteria: the FNGC rank, which is a pure analytics number based on the mixed condition model that we just went over, the metrics, the percentages that are in that model, and then FNGC spits out a ranking. A course value, which is an attempt at giving a player a numerical value based on how well they have played that course in the last 5 years. The lower the number, the better. And of course, we are playing DFS, so we are trying to find very, very unique plays against our fellow contestants. Hence why Russell Henley rises so much in my rankings, although I'm not too terribly fond of that. So anyway, there's a look at my top 10. I really can't argue too much about it, except for Russell Henley. I'm not nearly as high on him as it might seem. Otherwise, you see, 9 of these top 10 are, in the top 10 in terms of the pure analytics. The one player that is not is Ludwig Aubert, who finished 9th analytically. He's getting hurt by the fact that he has never played a competitive round at Riviera, so we don't know if he'll like it or not. Chances are he probably will, but since we don't know, he is getting hurt by that value, there is a chance he does not like Riviera. Anyway, there's a look at my rankings. Enough of that. Let's let's sort on the price board and figure out where the chalk is and how we can maneuver around that. So in the 5 digits this week, in the 10Ks, we have 4 players. We have Scotty Scheffler at 11.5. We have Rory at 11.2. Xander at 10.1. Victor Hovland at 10,000 even. Again, you see all 4 of these players are going to be very high in my rankings. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fade any one of these players. I still think I would make Scheffler my number 1 player. He's getting hurt essentially by the high projected ownership because he has played Riviera really darn well. But so has Victor. Xander has, obviously, California narrative, or California guy. Of the four in this, in the top, or in the 10Ks, I think of the four, I think I'm probably lowest on Rory, like the rankings, only because if I'm up here at Rory's price, I'm going to try and find 300 somewhere to get Scottie Scheffler. I'm just more confident in Scottie Scheffler performing well here than I am Rory. And I could be very, very wrong about that, but look at all the things that Scottie Scheffler is number one at. Approach, greens when it's difficult, bogey avoidance when it's difficult, which includes putting, first in total procs, second in par fours. You know, even on Poa annua, he's top 20 in this loaded field on Poa annua. He putts Poa pretty darn well. And you see Rory just hasn't in the past 24 months. So, again, smaller sample size, but it is something to note that Scottie's actually been pretty good on Poa annua, despite the, the putter generally being pretty cold. So, I still think I would make Scheffler number one. It's very close between Scheffler and Hovland because I love Victor Hovland this week. I think Victor Hovland's going to have a very big tournament. I'll make Xander third and Rory fourth only because with Rory's price, I'm just going to try to find 300 and go to Scheffler. Good evening, Gabe. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully your semi-vacation, I guess it is going well. And I appreciate what you have shared with me. I go with purely by the Fantasy National projected ownerships. Gabe was kind enough to send me his source of projected ownerships. So in comparison, Scottie Scheffler sitting at 30%, which you'd have to kind of expect considering how dominant he really has been lately. Rory, right about the same. Rory at 17.5 versus 15 at Fantasy National. Xander 20 versus 18, so pretty darn close. And Victor Hovland 20 versus 16. So all four of these getting a little bit more love according to Gabe's source than they are at Fantasy National, which you would probably generally expect anyway. Like I said, I'm going to go with Scottie Scheffler number one in this range, but I'm going to have a ton of Victor Hovland. This is chalk I'm going to eat. I don't care. I am all in on Victor Hovland this week. I'm going to use him, and I think he's going to have a big, big tournament this week. Simple as that. Moving down to the nines. Homa, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Cantlay, Ludwig Aubert, Justin Thomas, and Jordan Spieth. Look, I mentioned how Aubert really falls in my rankings just because this is an arbitrarily high number. He's not played a competitive round at Riv. We don't know if he's going to like it. Chances are he will. This seems like a very good Ludwig Aubert fit course, but we just don't know that for certain, especially since Homa and Morikawa and Cantlay have proven time and time again that they like playing here, especially Max Homa. In the 9Ks, Homa sitting at 15 per Gabe source and 17 at Fantasy National, so he's the first player that's actually under Fantasy National. Morikawa sitting at 21%, so he's he's right there. Patrick Cantlay at 21%, so he's a little bit higher, and then Aubert much lower. So the members of Fantasy National much higher on Ludwig Aubert, sitting at 24% per Fantasy National, 16% or 16.5 or so via Gabe's source. Justin Thomas pretty darn close. About 1% off. Jordan Spieth, 16% per Gabe source, 8% with Fantasy National. It's a dangerous play here, but you can't play everybody, so I think I'm going to plant my flag on fading Jordan Spieth. The irons haven't been great. Now, he is certainly very good around the green, avoids the bogeys, but just like his irons, the proximity hasn't been great in the last 36 rounds. He's actually been horrendous on Poa annua greens. He just played very, very well here. And I understand that a lot of pundits have Spieth on their card. I think I'm going to take a stand, especially considering seeing per Gabe Source Spieth at 16%. I think I'm going to take a stand, and Jordan Spieth's going to be the first of maybe a couple players here that if they play well, I'm going to lose. I'm probably going to fade Spieth, maybe full fading. In the 9Ks, look, I'm going to have both of these two. I don't care. This is more chalk I'll eat. You can see the kinds of lineups I'm probably building with a lot of concentration in these three players. Cantley is fine. He kind of let me down 2 weeks ago at Pebble, but Cantley's fine. Lots of good here. His only bad really is in the par threes. And don't forget, Max Homa is the number one putter on Poa annua greens the last 2 years. And for as much as Morikawa is not a good putter, Morikawa's top 10 in this field the last 2 years on Poa annua. He just loves Poa. Again, California guy. Cantley has been really bad on Poa, but I think he's better than what this is showing. So in the 9Ks, look, Thomas is a really, really tough pill to swallow for 21.5%, but I mean, he's been playing lights out lately, so it's really, really hard to fade him. Aubert, I'm not certain what I'm going to do with Ludwig Aubert this week. Again, this really does feel like a good fit for Ludwig Aubert. He's much less projected owned at the other source than Fantasy National. But you got reasons to perhaps limit your usage of him, for sure. He has not been the greatest when it's difficult. Very small sample size because he hasn't played a whole lot of difficult rounds on the PGA Tour. But he's not been great when it's difficult. So if you want to go with that narrative, that is a strong angle you can take in trying to limit your usage of Aubert or fade him outright. Thomas, I'm sure I'll have a little bit. Just be cautious because he's going to be so popular. So in the 9Ks, I'm using these two. Kind of lukewarm on Cantley and Thomas due to their ownerships. Ludwig Aubert is a pure wild card in my eyes. He's struggled when it's difficult, but this does feel like a very good Ludwig Aubert fit. And I'm going to fade Spieth, and I'll lose if Spieth plays well. Moving to the 8s, not going to go through each single player, but going to highlight a couple players. Again, Wyndham Clark, I really like this week. He's not going to be as unique as he was last week, at least compared to upper tier plays, but he's played Riviera very well. I think the irons are a little bit better than what's showing. He's always been very good around the green. 5th in greens, 3rd in bogeys when it's difficult. Demolishes these lengths of par 4s that are so very important at Riviera. You got to like that. He's also the number one player on the 2 par 5s of the back 9 that you have to really, really take advantage of. Now, he's got some issues, sure. Par 3s have been really bad. 3-putt avoidance on Poa has been pretty bad. But I like Wyndham Clark quite a bit. Seeing him at 12% per Gabe Source as opposed to 19 or 19.5 at Fantasy National. I really like seeing Wyndham Clark with that lower ownership. I'll be using him some. I like Cameron Young quite a bit. 16% versus 12%. I like that a lot too. The ball striking has not appeared to be there, but I was really impressed by his performance last week at Phoenix. Greens, he plays well when it's difficult, and he's played extremely well here because you see the analytics really didn't like him. But I'm going to be using Cameron Young. I really like Cameron Young this week. The one player that I'm kind of on the fence about is Tommy Fleetwood. Looking pretty unique in terms of in the 8Ks 8% per Fantasy National, 12% the other source. So, average those two, if you will, 10%. I just don't know what to make of Tommy. He's played okay here. The irons have been kind of lackluster, but he's generally really good when it's difficult, when around the green matters. So I just don't have a strong feel on Tommy. That's just the best way I can say it. If you have a strong feeling either way, whether you have a strong feeling he will play well, use it. You have a strong feeling he won't play well, don't use him. I'm just on the fence. I don't know what to do with Tommy. Because in the 8Ks, I'm going to be using Wyndham Clark. I'm going to be using quite a bit of Cam Young. I want to like Tagala, but there is every possibility that he could just fall apart, as he tends to do sometimes when it's difficult. You see everybody else in the 8Ks, with the exception of maybe Sung Jae, who we'll get to in the lower 8Ks. But, I mean, Tagala has been really, really bad hitting greens and avoiding bogeys, especially when it's difficult. And as much as he's been good around the green, like the putter, I would have liked to have seen the putter be in the top 10 for as bad as, the bogey avoidance has been and the greens has been. So, I don't know about Sahith. Sahith's sitting at 12% as well. Per Gabe Source, 17% here. He might be the second player that I will lose to if he plays well. I just don't have a great feeling with Tagala. Much the same with Sam Burns. Like, he's an elite putter, but man, this is really troubling here. Kind of troubling here. So the putter can keep him in the tournament, that's for sure. 19% per Gabe Source, exact same percentage really. So Burns is probably a good fade for me as well. So instead of Tagala, I'll probably switch course and say Spieth and Burns are my two big fades so far. Fitzpatrick's fine. I was really high on him last week. He played okay. He generally does play his best when it's difficult, as you can see here. 23rd and 5th in the two difficult to par metrics. But he's got a lot of bad things, as you can see. 44th, purely by the numbers. The irons haven't been great. Proximity, par 4s. He's got a lot of bad things going on. But he does have a previous top 10 here. Ow. He does have a previous top 10 here, so... and it was a recent previous top 10. So, take the good with the bad. He's sitting much higher. He's kind of the inverse here of Tagala and Wyndham Clark and Cameron Young. Fitzpatrick per Fantasy National is sitting at 9%. Per Gabe Source, he's at 16.5%. So a lot more of my guess is general public is on Fitzpatrick versus members of Fantasy National. Adam Scott loves Riviera. You can't deny that fact at all. He does not have a bad statistic across here. He does not have a pink or red statistic, but that is a whole lot of chalk, and a chalky Adam Scott usually doesn't play out well for you. So I'm sure I'll have him a little bit. I mean, he did rate in the top 10 for me in my rankings, and he's been so exceptional here at Riviera. But I'm going to be underweight on Adam Scott. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to have 25% Adam Scott. I'm just not there. Tom Kim. This does not feel like a good Tom Kim course. He's pretty darn unique. Sung Jae, 2.5 per Fantasy National, 8.5 per Gabe Source. We're starting to get into the territory where you're going to want to start playing some Sung Jae. And he's been okay here. He hadn't been great, but he's been okay here. I don't know if this is the week you start firing on Sung Jae, but it's going to be soon. It's going to be soon. If he's going to start being very, very unique, he's just too much of a talented player to let slide at 2.5%. J-Day, no thanks. So in the 8Ks, like I mentioned, I'll use Cameron Young quite a bit. I love Wyndham Clark. Don't know what to do with Tommy. Finau's fine. Going to be chalky. Be aware of that. Going to be chalky, but a fine play. Fitzpatrick's kind of interesting if you think it's going to be very difficult. I'm not really too much here in the lower 8s. Moving into the upper 7s, look, love Will Zalatoris. Going to be chalky. You can guess that. Will Zalatoris is sitting at only 8% per game source. That's surprising to me. I got to believe Will Zalatoris is going to be closer to Fantasy Nationals projected ownership. But even so, I'm going to use Will Zalatoris. Love Will Zalatoris this week. He's played exceptional here. The real interesting one is Højgaard in the upper 7s. I kind of like Højgaard. Sitting right at that 10.5% at both places. A lot of the metrics don't seem all that great. And again, he really falls because this course value, he's never played here. This kind of like Aubert. This feels like a pretty good Højgaard course. 8th in distance, which I think is going to play pretty good. Plays these length of par 5s pretty well. Very, very small sample size, but he's putt Poa Annua okay. Kind of like Højgaard. I think you might be able to gain some uniqueness there. I mentioned how Russell Henley, I would not have put him in my top 10. He's really, really catapulting in my rankings thanks to the very low projected ownership per Fantasy National. 10.5 at the other source. I don't know. I think it's okay. I'm not excited about Russell Henley. I think he's fine. I think he's probably a safe, fairly high floor. I just don't think you have much of a ceiling with Russell Henley. Number 1 around the green player is really comforting to have around Riv, but his putting on Poa is not good. And he's not really good at the length of these par 5s that you have to take advantage of. So take that for what you will. So in the upper 7s, I'm going to use a whole lot of Will Zalatoris. I'll be overweight on him. And Højgaard is kind of interesting as well. In the mid 7s, depending on how you define 7,400, I'll just say 76, 75, 74. I'm all over Hideki. Love Hideki Matsuyama this week. 8% per game source, only 12% of Fantasy National. This dude loves Riviera. Top 15 still with the irons. Top 5 still around the green. The par 4s need to get cleaned up, yes. But he destroys this length of par 4s. And he's not a total failure with the putter on Poa Annua. It's not great. It is Hideki after all. But he's had enough rounds historically at Riviera that he's been positive generally here. So, kind of like Hideki, as in a lot. I'm going to be way overweight on Hideki. And I'll lose if Hideki does not play well. Not really all that excited about anybody else in the mid 7s. Chris Kirk might be somewhat interesting. Top 10 in approach. Proximity's been great. Yeah, I'm really concerned. He does not play this length of par 4 as well. The putter is mediocre. I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling with Chris Kirk. He could be interesting because he's going to be unique. 6% and 6% at both places. So, it's going to be unique if you have a strong feeling. Moving into the low 7s. Going to absolutely ignore Corey Connors. He does not play Riviera well. A lot of that is due to the fact that he is just not good around the green. Do not like Corey Connors at all. He's not a good putter on Poa Annua. 3-putt avoidance is really bad. You can't see the number, but you can see the coloring. It's deep red. So, completely out on Corey Connors. Elsewhere in the low 7s, I don't know. Hostler's your most projected owned player down here, but it's also the player that I would have recommended, but it's not great. Par 4s and of the length are spectacular, but fairly middling with the putter. Doesn't have a lot of distance. He hasn't played particularly well here. Most chalky play in the low 7s. I can probably get away from Beau Hossler fairly easily. I just don't like a whole lot down here. I really don't. Just like in the 8s, I didn't like a whole lot in the low 8s. Don't like a whole lot in the low 7s. I've been really bottoming out my lineups with Hideki, maybe a little bit of Ricky, just because Ricky's sitting at 2.5 and 2% at both places. 2.5 at one, 2% at the other. I'm just going to play Ricky for the pure uniqueness value that you're getting off of him. That's where I've been kind of bottoming out in the 7s. We'll get to the 6s. I do like a couple of 6K plays here. But I just don't like a whole lot in the lower 7s. I just don't. So let's talk about those 6K plays. I want to mention maybe 2 to 3 players here. First one's Kurt Kitayama, and he doesn't rate out well. He's actually in the bottom 10 for me, but he's actually fairly solid when it's difficult. You think about his win last year at Bay Hill. The irons are pretty good. You see Fantasy National members like him quite a bit. Now, he's very unique. Well, he's about 8.5 per Gabe source, so a lot of people seem to be gravitating to Kitayama. At 11.5, it's a fade. I thought he was going to be a little bit more unique, but it's worth a look. I do like the style of game he plays. I think it fits Riv. The putter is really bad on Poa so you'd have to stomach that. But, I mean, there's not a lot of great putters on Poa say for maybe 2 or 3. The next player I want to mention is Tom Hoge. Again, getting a little bit of attention, but very good with the irons. The around the green. This is where Tom Hoge is going to backfire on me. I'm playing Tom Hoge for the irons. The fact that he's not going to take himself, in theory, out of the hole thanks to hitting a lot of these greens. And you think about his win, it was on Poa at Pebble Beach. He generally putts Poa pretty darn well. So as long as he's hitting the greens, I think he's going to be in this tournament. Because if he has to rely around the green, he's just really, really bad. So I'll play Tom Hoge a little bit. I wanted to mention him. Adam Svensson was my highest ranked 6K play. I'm not in love with it. He's really catapulting in my rankings thanks to this course value. It's only one tournament. He did finish tied for 9th last year. It's not nothing. But he's got a lot, and I mean a lot of really deep red statistics. He does not hit greens when it's difficult. He's not a great bogey avoider when it's difficult. I generally look at Adam Svensson when it's shorter and when it's on the easier side. So I'm not in love with it. I'm sure I'll have him maybe a time or two because he is my top 6K play. But I'm not in love with it. The other name I want to mention, other than Tiger, because if you're a Tiger fan or if you want to root for him or whatever, nothing analytically says to use Tiger. This is a sentimental play if you're wanting to. The other name I want to give you is Luke List. Again, Luke List, very, very unique. Well, I would have said that. Seeing him at just under 8%. So 8% and 10%. Look, it's all about the ball striking. Because you see the bogey avoidance is the worst in the field when it's difficult. The putter is, second or third worst in this field on Poa annua. But again, you think about his win, it was at the Farmers, Poa annua. So you're playing Luke List for the ball striking, and honestly, in terms of 3-putt avoidance, he's actually really good, 3-putt avoider. So there's a look at the price board, how I see things for Riviera this week, where the chalk is per two different sources. And again, thanks to Gabe for sharing his source with me. Let's start making some lineups. We're going to start with tiers lineups, and then we'll move on to classic, where we try to maneuver around all of the chalk. So for those who play tiers, tier 1 is Scotty Scheffler, Rory, and Xander. I think it's a pretty easy Scotty Scheffler. If you think Xander's going to be astronomically more unique, then take Xander. I think Rory's a pretty clear third in tier 1. I'll go Scotty. Xander's not bad if you're trying to squeeze out some uniqueness. Tier 2, Victor Hovland, Homa, Morikawa, Cantlay, and Justin Thomas. I love Tier 2. My goodness, this is going to be difficult. I think I'm going to take Victor Hovland, number 1. He's probably my pick to win this week. Good night, Gabe. Thanks for dropping in chat, and thanks again for sharing your info. Much appreciated. I'm sure we'll catch up at some point throughout the week or weekend. Thanks again for jumping in chat, and good luck this week. I'm going to take Victor Hovland in Tier 2. I really like Victor Hovland, but he's probably going to be fairly chalky. Maybe not with Morikawa in there. So I'll go Hovland. I'll go Homa second in Tier 2. I'll go Morikawa third. Actually, I'll just go in the order that they're listed here. I'll go Hovland, Homa, Morikawa, and these two are very, very close, in my opinion. Cantlay fourth and JT fifth. And it's not that I hate JT. I just really like Hovland. I think Homa's fine. Morikawa's really good. I don't think you can go wrong too many places in Tier 2. But just give me Hovland. Tier 3, Ludwig Aubert, Jordan Spieth, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, and Sahith Theegala. For as much as I like Tier 2, it's not that I hate Tier 3. I just don't know where to go. Aubert is a wild card. This seems like a good fit, but he's probably going to be pretty chalky. I don't like Spieth this week. Finau, kind of, middling in my eyes. Really likes this place, but he's probably going to be fairly chalky in terms of tiers. Tommy's a pure, for me is a wild card. I don't know what to do with Tommy Fleetwood. And then Theegala, I mentioned how I have some concerns. So in Tier 3, I guess I will go with Finau, just to try to save some uniqueness off of Aubert. But I'm not terribly confident in it. All I'll say is that Spieth is fifth for me in Tier 5. So I'll go Finau, then probably Aubert, Tommy, Theegala, and then Spieth. Tier 4, Sam Burns, Cam Young, Fitzpatrick, Wyndham Clark, Adam Scott, Tom Kim, and Sung Jae. Ooh. For me, I'm choosing between Wyndham Clark and Cameron Young, with Adam Scott an honorable mention if you're really, really focused on prior course history. I'll take Wyndham Clark. It's pretty close between Clark and Cameron Young, but I'll take Wyndham Clark. It's really close, though. Tier 5. J-Day, Zalatoris, Keegan, JT Poston, Højgaard, Henley, and Cole. For me, this is just a two-man tier. Depends on the construction of your team. If you think you have found enough uniqueness, take Will Zalatoris, which I will. I think I found enough uniqueness in this construction, so I'll take Will Zalatoris. If you've been chalky the entire way through, I think this is an opportune time to try to hit a home run with Højgaard. I think he could surprise this week. I'll take Zalatoris, Højgaard, if you've been way too chalky up to this point. And lastly, Tier 6, we have Hoagie, Seabass, Svensson, List, Putnam, Tiger, and Lucas Glover. Again, same thing. If you're sentimental, you want to cheer for Tiger, take Tiger. Nothing analytically says to play him. If you want to root for him, go ahead. I understand it. And he's not been terrible at Riv, for what it's worth. For me, I'm probably going to take Luke List and rely on the ball striking. Tom Hoagie could be interesting as well, and Svensson rated out the best. But I've got some concerns on Svensson. So give me Luke List because of the ball striking. Tom Hoagie is fairly close second. This tier's construction goes Scheffler, Hovland, Finau, Wyndham Clark, Will Zalatoris, and Luke List. All right, let's go to tiers. Or gosh dang it. Let's go to classic lineups. Figure out how we want to maneuver around all the chalk in the field this week. How we're going to build some unique lineups that gain some leverage on our fellow contestants. And a reminder, if you are able to catch the show live, I ask that you participate in the poll question this evening. Looks like the winner so far is the par 3-6 with the bunker in the middle of the green. Again, the poll question this evening, what hole do you think of when you think of Riviera Country Club? Right now, it is the par 3/6 with the very iconic bunker in the middle of the green. All right, so if we're going to try to duplicate a lot of these lineups that seem to be in our big GPPs, the first question is, are they playing Scheffler or are they not? So let's start off with a Scotty Scheffler lineup. And then at the bottom here, you've got List, at least per Fantasy National, gaining some attention. Hoagie gaining some attention. It seems like the consensus has been Bo Hostler at the bottom at 7,000. So we'll try to squeeze in as much as we can, only going down to Bo Hostler. Now let's see. Elsewhere, the next highest players here. The Cam Davis at 8%, Connors at 8% per Gabe's source. Well, where else are they really going? I mean, Cam Davis is only 7 there. Hideki's getting some love per Fantasy National. I'm trying to save him for the lineups that I really like. But it might actually be Hideki. Eric Cole also getting some play. So we'll try Hideki. Let's see. Eric Cole, 10%. Højgaard, 11%. Zalatoris is definitely in this mix as well. Poston's getting a lot at 13% on this other source. Let's throw in Eric Cole, because I'm not particularly on Eric Cole this week. And you see, this is the problem with Scotty Scheffler. If you're not willing to drop down into the 6s, you're going to have to hover in these 7Ks. That's not easy to do. Per Fantasy National, Zalatoris is going to be in this. He's quite a bit more unique per Gabe's source. Adam Scott's getting a whole lot of love, and he's right at 8,200. So you're looking at probably Scheffler, Adam Scott, probably Will Zalatoris, I guess. At least per Fantasy National, 16%. Now, I love Zalatoris. I'll be using Scheffler this week, and I love Matsuyama, but it's going to be pretty difficult to play a lot of these players together and gain any semblance of uniqueness. That's a chalky looking lineup with Scotty Scheffler. If our fellow contestants are not going to Scheffler, again, we'll just use Fantasy National projected ownerships. You're going Colin Morikawa, Obear. Charleston Thomas might be a bit too much. Sam Burns. Now let's drop down to Wyndham Clark, who I really like, but he's chalky. You're hovering in these high to mid 7s to fill out your lineup. This could be Will Zalatoris. Might be able to squeeze in an Adam Scott. Yeah, they can squeeze in an Adam Scott with this. And we're looking at 7,400 per player. This is probably Hideki and Bo Hostler per Fantasy National. They could use Kitayama. We could have used him with Scotty Scheffler. Again, this is just Will Zalatoris per Fantasy National. That's 20%. This is gross. This is horrendous. There's, as much as I like, 3, maybe even 4 of these players, you just can't put them on the same team. That's just, you're way too common. You're not going to rise in your big GPPs. Now, if you're playing double ups or 50-50s, it's probably a fairly solid lineup. Myself, I don't think I would use Adam Scott, but Morikawa's solid, Wyndham Clark solid, Obear is probably going to take to Riviera pretty darn well. But in terms of your big GPPs, this is just way too chalky. You can't do it. So how are we going to maneuver around these? Well, we'll start where we started with the chalky lineups. Let's try building, a fairly unique Scotty Scheffler lineup, or at least more unique than what we built for the chalk. So we'll start with Scotty. And I gave you a couple of players in the 6Ks. You might throw in Tiger with this. Absolutely. Luke List not going to be as unique. Tom Hoagie probably not going to be as unique as you think, but you're definitely going to gain uniqueness off of Bo Hostler, in my opinion, and Kitayama, in my opinion. Again, if you're a Tiger fan, go with Tiger. I'm going to throw Tom Hoagie into this, in this construction. And we don't have to even come down into the low sevens at all the rest of this way. Now, you might have some trouble fitting in another 9K. You could do it. Probably has to be Justin Thomas or Cantlay or Aubert. I don't think there's any reason why Cantlay won't play well here. I mean, again, going to be fairly chalky, but everybody up here is getting used more so than not. But it's going to be really hard to get Cantlay into this lineup, as you can see by the remaining price that we have. So instead, I'm going to try to drop into the 8Ks. I'll go Cameron Young. Now, per Fantasy National, he is getting some attention, but he's not really per Gabe's source. I mentioned Sungjae. This could be an opportunity to target Sungjae, at least per Fantasy National, 2.5%. A very, very talented player who's played okay here in the past. Let's see. We had 85. Fitzpatrick could be interesting as well. Not really on Tom Kim, not really on Jason Day. Yeah, let's throw in Fitzpatrick on this to get a little bit of uniqueness. 5%. See, I'm just not there with J-Day. 5.5 per Fantasy National. Per Gabe's source, looking at 7.5. So yes, unique, but the worst irons in this field the last 12 months or 36 rounds. He's pretty good. He's very good at avoiding bogeys, but again, that proximity number really, really bad. These par fours, he's been really, really bad. He's an elite putter on Poa Annua. He's one of probably the 3 to 4 guys you can depend on Poa Annua. But on top of the approach of the proximity, I want you to take a notice. Par 4s, red. Par 3s, red. Par 5s, red. Where is he going to do his damage? I just don't see it with J-Day. He's been okay here. I just don't see it. I would much rather play a chalky Will Zalatoris and find uniqueness elsewhere than play a J-Day who I'm just not confident in. Like, you and I agreed on quite a bit last week, Awaken. This is one where we'll differ. I am nowhere near J-Day. To round out this lineup, don't really like a whole lot in the low 7s, so this would be like Hideki. And at 75, Kirk could be fairly interesting, I suppose. Not in love with it. I don't love McCarthy either. This is the problem. This is the issue with building these Scotty Scheffler lineups. Straka, maybe. Where's 71? Very good putter. I don't think Poa is his preferred surface. I would much rather look at Sepp Straka on Bermuda. Struggles with the distance, but I don't hate it, especially since he is generally pretty darn good at not taking himself out of the hole when it's difficult. Again, see his performance at the Honda, or what's now called the Cognizant Classic. He's been very good there. That is a very difficult course. I don't hate it. Again, I would come down to a Kitayama almost before him, a Hoagie. I just don't like a whole lot in the low sevens. So for me, I would just go Ricky and Hideki. Leave 100 on the table. Yes, 12% might not seem the best, but the other Scotty Scheffler lineup was 16 or so percent. Coming down for Tom Hoagie, Luke List, maybe even Tiger. I really love Hideki. I'll be boned if Hideki doesn't play well. Ricky's quite speculative, but he's played okay here. Fitzpatrick just likes difficult courses. Riv's difficult. Cam Young's played well here, and Scotty Scheffler, the best player in the world. But where I've been going most often is in these Victor Hovland, Xander, Max Homa type lineups. I've been going like Victor. Morikawa's going to be chalky, but I'm just very, very confident in him. And I've been bottoming out these teams at Hideki or Ricky. Now, I've been hovering much more in the upper sevens, playing a Will Zalatoris, playing a very speculative Nikolai Højgaard, thinking that it should be a good fit for him. And again, this is Ricky, which I'm not going to try to do too often because his game's kind of up in the air right now. But these are the kind of lineups that I've been building. These Victor Hovland Morikawas, these Xander Homas, Hovland Cantlays, things of that nature, to try and get a little bit of uniqueness off of some of these other players like JT, like Obear, and whatnot. But that's what I have for you all. I'll stick around for a couple minutes if there are any questions between, if you want some analysis, quick analysis between two players or a lineup shell. What kind of wagers have you made this week? I certainly have I have a pretty big betting card between wagers and parlays. I felt pretty good with some parlays this week. So again, my betting card will be out later this evening once I finalize my lineups. Who's your winner? Oh, that reminds me. I got to give you my one and done. Last week, I ended up taking Max Homa. That blew up in my face historically with a big old miscut. This week, I'm probably going to have to take it pretty safe. I'm leaning pretty strongly to Will Zalatoris right now. Just because I'm very confident that he's going to play pretty well here at Riv, and I don't know how many people are going to use Zalatoris in one and done this week. I can see an argument if you haven't used him already to use Finau. I already have, so I can't use that one. Obear makes sense, but I'm quite hesitant because he has never played here. Morikawa makes a lot of sense, but I'm trying to save him for a major because he generally just plays majors well. The same reason why I'm trying to save Victor Hovland. If you haven't used Homa, he's probably the best play in one and done. I used him last week like a moron. But I'm leaning pretty strongly to Will Zalatoris as my one and done this week. JT with Tiger too good to be true. I mean, the way Justin Thomas has played lately, you can't count anything out. Like, I understand that some of these metrics are still in the red due to the struggles he had during last season, but it's seventh and around the green. He's starting to get back to the Justin Thomas. I don't think I'm going to take him to win, but to take him top 10, maybe even top 5, is not out of the question. Just understand he's going to be very, very chalky. 23% per Fantasy National, 21.5 per Gabe's source. You're not going to gain a whole lot of uniqueness off of Justin Thomas. I don't know how much uniqueness you're going to gain off Tiger, just because of the sentimental play. But if you were to go something like, you might be able to fit Scotty in this, or Rory if you wanted to. Yeah, you could probably do it. You're pushing it quite a bit. You're probably not able to go into the 8s, or if you do, it's Clark, Scott, Sung Jae. You asked about J-Day. I'm not there, but there's definitely uniqueness for you, Awaken, on J-Day. I'm just not there. That's a possibility. I think the other way I might go is to make Justin Thomas my third in this lineup. Do like a Max Homa, Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, and you're still in the mid to upper 7s. Granted, with Tiger, mid to upper 7s for 2 players. That's a speculative Højgaard and a Hideki, or maybe you like Russell Henley a lot more than I do. I'm not necessarily in on any of these other players, but that's certainly an interesting option. I think that's where I would go with a Thomas and Woods lineup, is try to squeeze in 2 players above JT in price, bottom out at Tiger, and then find either a low 7 and an upper 7 that you like, or 2 mid 7s that you like. Could be interesting. I think that would be a fairly unique shell. You might duplicate it just with the Tiger sentimentality, but I think it'd be a pretty unique shell. Looks like the par 3 6th is the winner of the poll question. So I want to thank everybody for participating in that. For me, I always think of Riviera as the first. The par 5, significant downhill. It's just where you see the most pictures, and Tiger. I think of Riviera, I think of Tiger, and all the pictures of Tiger are, when he's teeing off on that first hole. So that's just me. So interesting to hear from the community. I want to thank Awaken, P, Jeff, and Gabe for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Always love the interaction. I want to thank everybody else out there for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, ownerships, and all that, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of things and trying to help us win a little bit of money in the process. Reach out to me this week or weekend if you have success, how you're doing in your contests or with your wagers. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success next week as we start the Florida swing. So for all the wagers you've made this week for the Genesis Invitational, for all of the DFS contests you play this week for the Genesis Invitational, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.